Okay, so good morning. I'm going to share my screen and we can get started. So we have been discussing various implications of words, meaning what does a word include, what does a word not include. So, all of that is of course, crucial to understanding a neder, meaning if you don't know what the words mean, then you can't understand a neder. Now, we have seen before about 10 pages ago, so 10 days ago, we have seen before that the language that one chooses could affect very significant things. In particular, the language that's chosen could determine whether you're prohibiting a particular item, but if you were to trade it for something else, that item would not be prohibited. Or we could talk about a prohibition where even if you trade it for something else, the prohibition would go with it. And so specifically, if one makes a neder to prohibit something, the prohibition in certain circumstances will apply not only to the particular object, but also to what is exchanged for that item and what grows from that item. And so as we begin on the top of Nun Zayin Amud Aleph, we're returning to this topic. So if one were to say, Konam Peros Ha'elu Alai, these fruit, and the Ran specifically notes that it's got to be a reference to these fruit. So then Kona, or if you were to say Konan Hain Alpi, or you say that these fruit are Konam to my mouth, or Konam Hain Lipi, or that they are Konam to my mouth, so either on my mouth or to my mouth. You're not allowed to, not only are you prohibited to eat that food, that item, those fruit, but you're not allowed to benefit from anything that you were to trade for them, and you can't benefit from anything that grows from them. And so let's take a look at the Ran, at the first Ran. We're going to just do the first part of it to understand why this is the case. So the first Ran, left-hand side of the page, Konam Peros Ha'elu Alai, Konam Heina Alpi, Konam Heina Lipi, Asor B'chilufeihen, Ubegeduleihen. So all of that is going to be prohibited, not only with the item itself, but also what's traded for and what grows from it. Why? So the Ran explains, Mishum Dekevan Sheparat Hadvarim Hanesarim Alav, that since the person has specified the particular items, that it's elu, these particular fruit, the fruit in this pile right in front of us, Shiyonu Aleha Kehektish. So he has effectively created a sense of hektish on these items. Remember, the whole language of Konam, as we began Maseches Nedarim, we said is a language of hektish. And it's just not hektish that we're giving it to God, but rather it's hektish that we're for ourselves, that it's the part of hektish that is as if we are saying that we can't use it. Because we've made it like hektish, we're going to talk about it later. But James is not on at the moment. What? He's not on at the moment. Okay. So, Mishum mitzar b'chilufein, and as a result, just as hektish, if you give something to the Beis Hamikdash, Mark, not only is the item that you give to the Beit HaMikdash prohibited, but if you were to then trade that item for something else, that the traded item would also be prohibited. And anything that grows from it. Just as we say with respect to hektish, that anything that's traded for or grows is going to be prohibited. It is not like a flat neder, meaning if I prohibit all apples to me, so that is different from if I were to forbid these apples to me. So if I forbid these apples to me, and then Mark goes and says, hey, Stan, let's trade one of these apples for a pear. Well, then the pear that Mark has traded to get instead of that apple will also become prohibited for me.
Which one was better?
Right now I'm saying that the apples are prohibited, but the pears are permitted. So that the pears would be better for me. So for example, the Ran says that it's not comparable to if I were to say, a simple prohibition of saying I'm not going to have dates, umin ha'nabim, I'm not going to have grapes, shekevin shelo parad, that because I didn't specify which ones, va'asar alav kol hamin, and what I did is I prohibited for myself every one of them, meaning I prohibited all dates, I prohibited all grapes. Lo asam alav hektish. Then it's not as if they're hektish. Shalonis kavin elalam achilas otomin, because my intention was the entire category, the entire species. Mishum hachi lo mitzar b'chi lufeihen b'gidulehen, and as a result, the what is traded for them or what grows from them will not be prohibited. Ela b'porei, unless I specify. Kihacha, like in this case, the Amar Perot Ha'elu, I said specifically these fruit. V'hua dinami de'im Amar Perot Makom Ploni. If I were to say that the fruit in Washington, D.C. is prohibited, so then that fruit is specified. And so as a result, all of that fruit would be considered like hektish for me, and any switches would be problem. O perotav shel ploni, or if I were to say the fruit of Stan, so then I would be prohibited to have any of Stan's fruit or anything that's Stan exchanged for the fruit. The kevin sheyachad, because I have specified harehu kiporit, it's like I've detailed, because I've narrowed the field, it's as if I've specified. V'aser v'chilufein v'gidayim kemotion nifrash b'mishnah shilafanenu. Okay, so that's exactly as we've just said, and so the idea is that it is as if they are hektish. Now, the question that the Rishonim ask is, why don't we say the principle of in connection with growth is why don't we say the principle of zev gorim? We have this principle in halacha that when you have two causes for something, and one that is prohibited and one that is permitted, so then as long as they are both necessary, so then often we will say that the permitted item, that the item that results could be considered permitted, because you had two causes, one of them was permitted and one of them is prohibited. And here, presumably, again, we have at least two causes, because you have the item itself, which is going to serve as the seed, and then you have the earth and the water and everything else that's being put into the ground, and the sunshine, and all of that is permitted. So we have a zev gorem, and yet in this particular instance, it's considered prohibited. So why is that? So the two answers that are most frequently given are, one, that this is exactly like hektish, and according to many Rishonim, hektish also has the principle of zev gorem is aser, and the other answer that is given is that because this is a davar sheyesh lo matirin, because one is able to nullify one's vow, so as a result, that's why we're going to say, and when we have something that's potential, a davar sheyesh lo matirin, something that is currently prohibited but has the possibility of being permitted, we have a general rule that we learned just a few days ago, I think it was last week, that when you have something that's a davar sheyesh lo matirin, we will often say that it does not become nullified. And so here, in particular, we're going to say that it's not going to become nullified because it's a davar sheyesh lo matirin. So that is principle number one in our Mishnah. Principle number two is that the following statements do not cause exchanged items or items that grow from the prohibited item to be prohibited. So let's take a look. Sha'ani ochel, and the Bach here changes it sha'ani and throughout this daf to she'eni ochel, that I'm not going to eat. But the bottom line is that it's clearly an indication that I'm not going to eat something, and it's not referring to a specific fruit, but it's referring to all of a particular fruit. Sheini ochel, I'm not going to eat all apples. I'm not going to eat all oranges, whatever it is that I say. Or shani to'em, or that I'm not going to taste all of those things. Well, then mutter b'chi.
Grapes too?
That we could have grapes. We could talk about grapes. So let's talk about grapes. So if I say I'm not going to eat all grapes, well then mutter b'chilufein. Then if Mark were to trade some of my grapes for some oranges, well then I would be allowed to eat the oranges, because because I prohibited all grapes. So it's not as if it were the items traded would also become prohibited, and it's not as if the items that grow from it would also be prohibited. Now, of course, clearly, if I were to say all grapes, well, then anything that grows from a grape is likely to be a grape. So it's going to be hard for that to be, so that still would be prohibited. But if I were to say all grapes that have already grown, right? So then that might be a situation where the grapes that now grow would be permitted. All right, but davar. So again, the davar shizah. However, so mutar b'chilufein, you can eat the things that are traded for them or what grows from them. But b'davar shizaro kala. But this all assumes that the seed disappears, meaning that when you plant the grape seed, that grape seed essentially becomes nullified and is completely a nothing afterward. It completely decomposes. Aval b'davar she'ein zaro kala. But if it doesn't completely decompose, meaning it's like a potato, right? When you grow a potato, you see the original potato is there, right? You know, it grows out of the potato, but the potato stays there. You can see it, especially if you grow it out, hydroponically. So then, in that situation, I feel gedulin asurin. Well, then even what grows from the growth is going to be prohibited. And so the Ran helps us understand why. So if we take a look at the Ran, 11 lines down, b'davar shezaro kala aval davar she'ein zaro kala afil gedulin asurin. So akula masnisin kai. So this principle of saying that when we're talking about growth, it refers to both of our original statements. So not only are we talking about when I say that if I have a general statement about all apples, that we don't apply the prohibition to the things that are exchanged or the things that grow from them. So in the case, that only will be true if the seed decomposes. But if the seed does not decompose, well, then the next generation will also be prohibited. But it also applies even on the beginning of our Mishnah. So akula masnisin kai v'hachi kamar, and this is what this line is saying. My da'amrina b'reisho, that which we said in the very beginning of our Mishnah, asur b'gedulan, that the growth is going to be prohibited because I said these apples, and so as a result, anything that even grows from these apples, damash b'dafka b'gedulan mitzvah, because the implication of our initial statement of the growth being prohibited was that only the first growth is going to be prohibited. Aval b'gedule gedulin. If I then take an apple from the tree that grows as a result of my prohibited apple, and then I plant that apple, well, then that growth from the growth, that would be shari, that would be permitted. So hani mili b'davar shezaru kala, but that is only true where the original seed disintegrates. Tibiki hai gavna nehi debegidolin harishonin mitzar. That only with the first growth is it going to be prohibited. Because even though there's nothing left from the original item, that from what was prohibited of the growth, the hazaro kala, because the original seed completely disintegrated. Lo gari gedulan michalifin. The Khalifin Nami Avagav the Lace Bahumidi Mimai the Asar Aleha Afilu Hachi Asiri. That when you think about it, right? If you think about a growth of an old apple into a new apple, and there's nothing left of the old apple in the new apple, that's effectively very similar to trading that apple for an orange, because there's nothing left of the original apple in the orange, because the orange is an orange and not an apple, and yet we say that chilufeihen, what is traded for them, is going to be prohibited. But miyu begedulin, when it comes to the growth from the growth, if I now take that second apple and plant it, and now I've got the third apple, so I've got the growth from the growth, shari, that would be permitted. To kevan to gedulin bedavar shezaro kala kichalifin, that since what grows from something that disintegrates is as if you traded it, damo, it's comparable to that. So kiheki de khalifi khalifin mutarin. So similarly, if Mark were to trade my apples, if I say this pile of apples is prohibited, and Mark trades an apple for an orange, and so now this orange is going to be prohibited, and now Mark says, you know what, I want to trade the orange for a banana. well, you know what? The banana will be now permitted to me, even though it is also something that was traded. That we saw earlier about 10 pages ago, so 10 days ago. So Gabi Machron v'Kadash, if with respect to selling something and making it holy. B'dimehen mikudeshes, that with respect to using that money for marrying somebody. So hachinami gedule gedulin shari. So here too, what grows from the growth is going to be permitted. Umishum hachi tani gedulein demashma avilu aval gedule gedulin lo. And that's why our Mishnah specifically says that it's only gedule hen that is going to be prohibited. But gedule gedulin, something that grows from the gedule hen, is not going to be prohibited. Because mishum demayri b'davar shazaro kalati. And that's all true because we're talking about a situation where the seed disintegrates. V'chein nami b'seifa d'shani ochel shani toem, that if I say I'm not going to eat, I'm not going to taste, mutter then I can eat the things that are traded for or the things that grow from it. Davka b'davar shazaro kala, but only when it comes to something where the seed disintegrates. Aval davar she'ein zaro kala. But so now, why can't we eat from the things where the seed does not disintegrate? Bein bereisha, bein b'seifa, whether it's in the beginning or the end. Afilu gedule gedulin asurin. The entire thing becomes prohibited. Why? So this is the key line here in understanding this daf and understanding this Ran. Mishum dekevan de'ein zaro kala, because the seed has not disintegrated. Harei b'gedule gedulin halalu me'urav behen mina iser, that there's actual prohibited item mixed up in this growth from the growth. So because my original seed is really there, so that seed has sent out elements of itself into the fruit, and so there's an element in the first growth of actual isser in it, from the original isser, from ha'isser harishon. And nedarim havalahu davar sheyesh lo matirin, and a neder is something that has the possibility of being undone, meaning what is prohibited now doesn't have to be prohibited forever. So to ka'adam rina b'gemara, as we are going to say in the Gemara in 2 days. And as we saw earlier, this is a min b'mino, right? In order, as the Ran beautifully explained when we learned last week, the Ran has a philosophy that in order for something to be nullified, you need to have differences. And when you have min b'mino of a davar sheyesh lo matirin, there is not enough difference. And so as a result, that difference cannot become batal. And so as a result, that's going to be the reason that it's not going to be nullified. And so as a result, even the growth of the growth is still all going to become prohibited, because there's still a little bit of the mashma'ut of the original growth in that eventual growth, because the original growth does not disintegrate, does not disappear. Okay, so now that we've understood that, so now we're going to apply the same principles with respect to somebody who is talking about their wife and says yes.
Yeah, this is wonderful. It's a review of much of Masechta Truma in the Yerushalmi, where they discuss all these things in gory detail.
Yes. So say a little bit more. What, this concept of the growth and the
grow. It's exactly what you're saying. The Mishnah in Truma holds that there's a difference between whether the seed disappears or there's still a piece there, and at least in the Mishnah, it looks like it is forever. I think the Yerushalmi actually puts a limit of like 3 generations on it. And there's also you're talking about exchanging. There's also the Meiser Seni issue, that when you put the Kedusha of Meiser Seni on the coins become hektish, and then there's a discussion about what happens when the coins get mixed up.
Right.
And what you can do with them. Can you get married using a Meiser Seni coin?
Okay. We just had, I think, the beginnings of a announcement, but it sounds like it's just a speaker.
Oh, I was wondering what was going on there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, and so that very interesting. That of course, yes, and we're going to actually. It's perfect that you are forecasting a little bit of what the Gemara is going to do when we get to the Gemara on the second side of this daf. So let's continue with the Mishnah. And so ha'omer leishto. So same principle. Kona masa yadayach alai. If I say that the work of your hands is going to be like a korban to me, or konam hein alpi, or they're konam to my mouth, on my mouth, or konam hein lipi, or they're konam to my mouth. So aser bechilufei, and because I focused on one person's handiwork, so then that's going to be a sufficiently specific that it's as if that item is hektish to me, and therefore the items that are traded for them would also be prohibited. And what grows from them will be prohibited. Shani ochel. However, if I say again that I'm going to use the words of I'm not going to eat, shani to'em, or I'm not going to taste, and it has nothing to do, and it's a more broad statement. So then, mutar b'chilufein u'b'gidulein. Well, then it would be permitted with their switching or their growth. The davar shazara kala. But again, this all assumes that the seed disappears. But aval davar she'ein zara kala afilu gedulin asurin. Even the growth of the growth is going to be prohibited. So that's the same basic principle that applies. Okay, so now that we've done that, now it's time to add the next concept. Now that we got that down, we're ready to make things more complicated. You ready for things to be more complicated, Mark? Now we're going to add time in. Okay, so now they're going to add the time component. We're going to say ad ha-pesach. What does that mean? She'at oseh eini ochel ad ha-pesach. If I say now, if the ad ha-pesach modifies my eating, meaning that the prohibition on my action, well then she'at oseh eini miskaseh ad ha-pesach. Or if what you make, I'm not going to wear until Pesach. Even if you make it before Pesach, I've only prohibited for myself until Pesach. So after Pesach, I am allowed to do it. Meaning that if the time modifies the action of the neder, then the action is only restricted until the end of the period, but not thereafter. However, but if you focus the timing on the condition as opposed to the action of the neder, well then, then it's going to be the exact opposite. Or sha'at oseh ad pesach eni miskaseh. If I say that what you make until Pesach, I'm not going to eat. What you make until Pesach, I'm not going to wear. So, well then, then it's forbidden for me forever because you fulfilled the condition. The condition was what was timed, and not the action. So that it's very crucial where, as we see with the famous book Eats, Shoots, and Leaves, right? The book that highlights that you can have that same, the panda bear eats, shoots, and leaves. It eats, shoots, and it eats leaves. But you could also say that the criminal, when he went into the store, he ate, shot, and left. Right? Meaning it could be three different things. So the question is what is going on? Where do you put the commas? Where are the modifiers? And so a very big difference between a prohibition that only applies until Pesach or a prohibition where the condition must take place before Pesach, but would apply forever. Okay, so that's that. Now that we've got that down and we've got that concept, we can make it even more complicated. Now let's put both a time on the condition and a time on the action. So if the benefit that you're going to get from me until Pesach is going to be prohibited for you. If you go to your father's house before Sukkot. Now, we're understanding this as talking about after this past Sukkot. So basically right now, right, where Pesach is the next big holiday. So Pesach is the next big holiday. What? I know, it's going to be fun. So wait. We're going to talk. We'll at the end, we'll talk. Okay, at the end. So we're going to do. So we got the Pesach is coming, And so if I say to you, if I were to say to my wife that if she goes to her father's house between now and next Sukkot, then she's not allowed to benefit from me until Pesach, right? So the time of the condition is actually longer than the time of the prohibition. Well, then im holechas at lebeit avich adacha ahalcha lifnei Pesach. If she goes before Pesach, asura bahana ada Pesach. Well, then clearly, if she goes before Pesach, everybody knows before Pesach is still before next Sukkot. So she's done the action that triggers the oath, and so as a result, she's going to be prohibited to benefit from the husband until Pesach. But if she only goes after Pesach, and let's say she benefited from her husband before Pesach, well, then she's not going to have that violated the vow as violating a neder, but bival yachal, but she'll have violated the concept of not fulfilling her word, and so as a result, it's not the same prohibition. So now, and now let's say if we reverse it, so that instead of the condition being the longer period of time, the condition is the shorter period of time. That you're not allowed to benefit from me until Sukkot. If you go to your father's house between now and Pesach, well then then clearly if she goes to her father's house before Pesach, well then she'd be prohibited to go to her to benefit from her husband until Sukkot. But but after Pesach, she's definitely able to go. Whatever happened before Pesach, she'd be allowed to go to her father's house after Pesach, because the condition, the deadline for the condition of the vow has expired. So as a result, her further action will not trigger any kind of vow. So those are all the different areas that we tried to cover. So we dealt with the first thing that we dealt with in our Mishnah was the concept of the difference between focusing on a specific set of fruit versus broad. The second concept that we covered was whether the seed disintegrates or not. The third concept was the issue of time, and then and that concept of time could apply both to the condition and to the action. And now we're ready for the question that will take up much of the next couple of dapim, and that is the following. Ha'omer le'ishto. So now we're first going to quote our Mishnah. Ha'omer le'ishto konam ma'aseh yadayach alai. That you're not allowed to. I'm not allowed to benefit from your work. So konam hein alpi, konam hein lefi, etc. So all of that outlined in the Mishnah. So now we're going to detail the question. And the question is not clearly based on this language of our Mishnah, but rather this Mishnah will end up being one effort to try to answer the question. But before we get there, we won't get there today. Let's see what the question is, and then we'll see what the answers are. So Yishmael ish kfar Yama. There was a fellow by Yama, by the sea, whose name was Yishmael. V'amri la ish kfar Diyama. And some people say that he was from the village of Diyama or Dima. So ha'alo biyado batzel sha'akaro b'shviyah. So now here's the question. You have an onion that was in the ground during the Shemitah year, and you uprooted it, okay? And now, of course, you're not allowed to just take it, meaning if so it's going to, the question is now unato b'shminit, and now you planted it again in the 8th year. So you have this prohibited item that you're not allowed to have benefited from, right? So it's supposed to be it's subject to various limitations, and so we'll assume that it's got the sanctity of the Shemitah year and is going to be subject to those limitations of the Shemitah year. But now you plant it in the 8th year. V'rabu gidulav al ikaro. And what grows from it is more than what was originally there. And according to the Ran, it was even 60 times more than what was originally there. So it's definitely batal. So, or definitely could be potentially batal. V'halchid kama bailet. And now here's the question. Gidulav heter v'ikaro asur. When do we say that the new growth is permitted and the original is prohibited? And kaven de rabba gedula mikaro oten gedule heter malin es ha'isur. Do we say that basically because the majority is the permitted, and so as a result, the entire thing should be permitted? Oh, low or not? Or do we say that, look, the original onion is still potentially there, and as a result, it's going to be prohibited? So that's the question. Do we say that it's all permitted, or do we say it's going to be prohibited? So we're going to give two answers today. So de Rabbi Ami. So first he went to Rabbi Ami lo hava bidei, but he wasn't able to give him an answer immediately. So de Rabbi Yitzchak Nafka. So he went to Rabbi Yitzchak Nafka, pashat le min hada. And so as a result, he tried to answer from the following: to Amar Rabbi Chanina to Trisa, that Rabbi Chanina from Trisa said the following: Amar Rabbi Yanai, said in the name of Rabbi Yanai. What did he say? V'tzel shel truma shenato. If you have an onion of truma that is planted, v'rambu gedulav ali kara, and now the new growth exceeded what was originally there, mutter. Well, then the entire item is permitted, meaning you don't treat it as if it was truma. So as a result, it's going to be permitted, presumably to a non-kohen. So Amarle Rabbi Yirmiyah says that's not going to be a good answer for Itam and Rabbi Yezerika. And some people say it was Rabbi Zerika who made this point. Shavik Mar train v'avid b'chad. 1 second. In order to provide this answer, you are effectively disagreeing with two alternative opinions. And usually when we have two against one, we follow the two. And you are following the one. So Manin who trained. And who are the two other people who disagree with the statement of Rabbi Yanai? So to Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Abau said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Yalda besibcha bezikne. If you have a young tree, an orla tree, so that during the first 3 years its produce is prohibited, and you graft it onto an old tree, uba peyrot, and now and on the young tree there was fruit, but the fruit was very small. Even if the fruit now grew 200 times its original size, so as a result, it's now grown 200 times while on the old tree. So as a result, maybe we should say that it's permitted. We still say usser. It's still going to be usser. So that's opinion number one. So we see that the new growth does not nullify the old growth. So Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Nachmani, Rabbi Yonatan. So now we have a second statement. The first one was from Rabbi Yochanan, the second now Rabbi Yonatan. And Batzel Shinato Becherem. If you have a onion that was planted in a vineyard, and it's important to note that you're not allowed to plant other things in a vineyard. That is called kalayim. That's mixing, an improper mixing of plantings. So Shinakar Kerem. But now, after the onion was planted and it was originally going to be prohibited, now you uproot the entire vineyard. So all that's left in the field is onions. And so as a result, now what grows now should be permitted. Asur, even if the onion grew 100 times, we're going to say because it began and prohibited, it's going to stay prohibited. So we see again that the permitted growth does not nullify what was there originally and was prohibited. So we see that these two, you can't use that as the answer, because if you were to use that as the answer, you should use the other two approaches, which would say it would be prohibited. So now that we've eliminated that first answer, so now we're going to offer a second answer. So Hadar Asal Kamei Rabbi Ami. So now that we've eliminated the first answer, we're going to go now to the second answer. So and go to the second answer. And Upashat Le Min Hada. And so he went back to Rabbi Ami, and Rabbi Ami tried to answer from the following: Da Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. We have Rabbi Yitzchak said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Litra b'tsalam shetikna. Let's say you had a litra amount of onions that you have already separated trumas and maestros, uzra'a, and now you plant that onion that trumas and maestros have been taken. Mis aseres lefi kula. Then not only when it comes time to measure the amount of your produce, not only do you have to look at what grew, but even the original amount, meaning the original bulbs that you planted. Now, I don't know exactly how onions grow, so this is, but imagine that you had one bulb that you planted, and now as a result of that growth, you end up with 10 bulbs. Well, now you have to, you don't get to say, well, I started with one bulb, and that bulb that I planted already had Trumas and Meisters taken off of it. So I should not have to take Trumas and Meisters off the one of those 10 new bulbs, because one of the 10 new bulbs is really the old bulb. And the answer is no, you have to take Trumas and Meisters off the whole thing. So we see, according to this answer, that the new growth has nullified the old growth. Alma osin gedulim mevat lenikar. So we see that the new growth has nullified what existed before. No, and the answer is dilma lechumra shiny. Maybe to be strict is different. And so as a result, we have now rejected answer number 2 as well. And so we're now ready to give answer number 3. But for that, you are going to need to stay tuned to tomorrow's daf. So wish everybody a wonderful day. Any questions before we finish? All right. Have a wonderful and great day. And I look forward to seeing everybody, God willing,
I'll
tomorrow.
tell you about Hanukkah next week.
I
Chag
will.
Sameach, Yasher
Chag
Koach.
Sameach, Chag Sameach, Chag Urim Sameach.
December the 7th, Sunday.